Hello, my name is Dan Subotnik. I teach here and have a connection to this whole story that I'll tell you about in a little bit. In the meantime, welcome to the annual Kristallnacht commemoration event. In this case, we are honoring Aristides de Sousa Mendes, a Portuguese consul. You'll learn all about him in a little bit when we start the movie. For those of you who do not know the term or name of Sousa Mendes and the term of Kristallnacht, a dramatic education is in store for you. Bem-vindo à la comunidade portuguesa de Mineola that is sponsoring the event along with Touro Law School today. I'd like to introduce you to our dean, Patricia Salkin.
Thanks, Dan. And on behalf of Touro Law Center, I'd like to welcome all of you to our facility this evening, and I hope that it's the first of many trips that you will make to be with us in the future. I'd also like to welcome New York State Senator Jack Martins, Village of Mineola Deputy Mayor Paul Perea, and Sousa Mendes Foundation founder Olivia Matisse. I also would like to acknowledge the director of our Center for Holocaust Law and International Human Rights, Professor Harry Riker, who is our resident subject matter expert on all things Holocaust and more at Touro. And I'd like to recognize our Dean Emeritus, Howard Glickstein, and our most recent former dean, Larry Rafel. Thank you for coming to continuing to support the Kristallnacht programs at Touro Law Center. And I'd lastly like to thank, before I get into some substantive remarks, we would not be here tonight in this building were it not for the efforts of two people at the Law Center, Professor Dan Subotnik and Associate Dean Ken Rosenblum. So thank you both very much for making this event possible.
May I add something? And Gabriel Marquez, both a student here and a prominent member of the Portuguese community in Mineola. Where are you, Gabe? There he is in the back.
Gabriel, thank you. So tonight, Touro Law Center is pleased to join with Long Island's Portuguese community to recognize the courage, sacrifice, and humanity of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, whose principled actions more than 70 years ago saved so many from the Holocaust, including, as you will learn, a member of our own Touro Law family. It's a perfect match, really, not only because it hits so close to home. Touro, as you may know, is under Jewish auspices, and at the core of its mission is an obligation to teach the relevance of the lessons of the Holocaust in the context of the contemporary legal system. This is why we observe Kristallnacht each year, to keep alive the memory of the horrific night 75 years ago that marked the end of the rule of law and the beginning of the Holocaust, and to honor courageous individuals like Sousa Mendes, who refused to give in to society's pressure and whose actions save lives, often at the risk of their own safety and well-being. It's also appropriate that we join the Portuguese community in this observance because Touro has deep Portuguese roots. The Law Center is named for Isaac Touro and his son, Judah, leaders of early America who represent the ideals upon which the college bases its mission. They were descendants of Portuguese Jews who emigrated to the United States in the mid-18th century. Isaac, a rabbi, was named the spiritual leader of a congregation in Newport, Rhode Island that still bears his name. The Touro Synagogue is the oldest synagogue in the United States and the only one that remains from the colonial era. In his famous 1790 letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, President George Washington pledged that the new nation would, quote, give to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. setting the standard for religious freedom in the new nation. Isaac's son Judah overcame a childhood of poverty brought on by the Revolutionary War, became a prosperous merchant in New Orleans, and went on to a life marked by extraordinary patriotism and philanthropy. His generosity helped fund Jewish and non-Jewish causes, including the first public hospital in the nation, which survives today in New Orleans as the Touro Infirmary, the first free library on this continent, and pioneering Jewish settlements in Jerusalem. It should come as no surprise, given the family's extraordinary determination, that Touro in Portuguese means bull. And recognition of Ambassador Sousa Mendes by a law school is appropriate for another reason. He was trained as a lawyer, a 1908 graduate of the prestigious University of Coimbra, and the son of an appeals court judge. I like to think that his legal training and his fidelity to the rule of law played a part in his decision to take the courageous stand against the orders of his government and for human rights and dignity. Or, as Sousa Mendes himself said, quote, "I would rather stand with God against man than with man against God." His conduct remains an example for all of us, and we are honored to recognize him this evening. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you New York State Senator Jack Martins. He's a first-generation American born to parents who emigrated from northern Portugal in the 1960s. He's a resident of Mineola, where he served as mayor for 8 years prior to being elected to the state Senate. He received his bachelor's degree in political science from American University in 1988 and a JD from St. John's University in 1991. Senator, thank you for being with us this evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's great to be here, and it's a privilege to be here as we celebrate the life of a very special individual, but also remember the anniversary 75 years ago of Kristallnacht and the beginning of the Holocaust. And I think, obviously, these two issues are intertwined. And before we get into that, I want to take the opportunity to wish a good evening to those members of the Portuguese community that are here, not only from the greater Mineola community, but also from the greater Farmingville community. I see that we have the president of the Farmingville Portuguese Club here with us today, Carlos Fonseca. Carlos, it's good to see you. As well as the president of the Mineola Portuguese Center, Frank Teixeira, who's here as well. Frank, good to see you as well. Now, when we talk about what this means to our community and what this means to the larger world community, we have to also understand the place that Aristides de Sousa Mendes held in Portuguese society. Here's a person who owed his position, his family welfare and well-being to the status quo, who came from a privileged background, and as part of that privileged background, escaped a lot of the issues, persecutions of living under a fascist regime in Portugal at the time. His family was, in the vernacular, connected, and certainly as a judge, the son of a judge and a son of a well-connected family, he had a position in the diplomatic corps. His brother, his twin brother at the time, was also the Portuguese foreign minister. So this is a person who had a lot to lose by bucking the system, and certainly had a lot to gain by following direction. And if we understand where that is, we can truly understand the courage that it took to take the steps and the actions that he did. Now, we have to understand also the time that we're talking about. We go back to 1938 and the beginning of the Holocaust. Well, let's put this into perspective. These actions that Aristides de Sousa Mendes took were in the third week of June of 1940. Okay. We are literally 2.5 years later. We are at a point when Germany is advancing through Europe. They have advanced through Belgium and forced people into France. France has capitulated, and you have literally tens of thousands of people who are making their way to southern France looking for a way out. And the way out was through Spain to Portugal, that although neutral at the time, certainly had sympathies with the Nazi regime. There was an order that was issued in May of 1940 that restricted diplomatic visas, or restricted the diplomatic corps from issuing visas to anyone, any refugees, with particular clarity, any refugees, especially those of Jewish descent. And against this contrast, one individual made the difference. At the time, as you'll see from the movie, and I had the opportunity, I'll tell you in advance, to watch this movie probably about 2 years ago when it was first presented in Nassau County at the Holocaust and Tolerance Center up in Glen Cove, where they had an exhibit for Sousa Mendes. Extraordinary movie, enjoy it, and I'm not going to give away much in my discussion here tonight, but it's important that we contextualize what's going on the screen and who this person was. And as much as we talk about people's courage and as much as we talk about people doing the right thing for the right reasons, it's also important that we understand the consequences of this person, this extraordinary person doing the right thing. As a direct consequence of his actions, as you have undoubtedly read, 30,000 people were able to escape safely across the French-Spanish border and make their way to Portugal and eventually to all parts of the world. Among them, 12,000 Jews who certainly owe their lives to his extraordinary courage and perseverance and the ability to make the right decision at the right time. And when we talk about morality and when we talk about people's ability to make those decisions at the right time, we have to sit back and wonder what we would do under those same circumstances. And I would hope that when we do that, we would measure ourselves against his courage and his perseverance and his integrity and his conviction, and we would find that we'd be able to do the same thing. So we will each ask that of ourselves, and we won't ask for a show of hands. But let's understand what was at stake here and how extraordinary this individual was. When I had the opportunity to visit Yad Vashem in 2008, I took the special opportunity to go out and find the tree that had been dedicated to Sousa Mendes, because I thought that it was extraordinarily important culturally, and certainly from my background, to go back and find a connection with someone who had actually performed above and beyond. So I did have that opportunity. I was able to go out and to take part in a little bit of a remembrance on my own. But if I were to ask you, whether you're of Portuguese descent or not, if I were to ask you to go out to the community at large and ask anyone if they knew who Aristides de Sousa Mendes was, I dare say that we would probably not find a single person on the streets who would be able to tell us who this person was. And as remarkable as a story as he has, and as much of an impact as he has had on literally, I think if we trace it, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have been born since and would not have had that opportunity had he not acted. It's extraordinary that he is the most important person that we've never heard of. So I'm grateful to the Sousa Mendes Foundation for their initiative in continuing to promote the need not only to teach about this extraordinary individual, but more importantly, to teach the lessons that Aristides de Sousa Mendes brings to all of us. So again, I want to take the opportunity to Dean Salkin. Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting this and for including Sousa Mendes in the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht. I want to thank everyone for being here. Certainly, I want to thank the panelists who will be speaking later. I'm looking forward to that discussion. And in a special way, a todos os amigos aqui, nós portugueses, aqui reunidos, vamos lembrar que é uma pessoa especial. da nossa comunidade, um português que é um exemplo para todos, não só em Portugal, mas um exemplo para todos no mundo. Porque quando nós temos dificuldades, temos um exemplo de um grande homem que na altura certa fez aquilo que tinha a fazer e nessa decisão salvou milhões de pessoas. É um exemplo para todos. E temos uma oportunidade hoje aqui para celebrar o facto que era português. To all of you, a wonderful evening. Looking forward to the movie. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to participate in this great forum with you. And allow me the opportunity also to introduce a colleague and a friend, trustee and deputy mayor of the village of Mineola, Paul Pereira.
Thank you. You would think that the senator was the history teacher, so since he covered the history, I will not do the same. Good evening, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to Touro and Dean Salkin for organizing this event. Tonight, as we commemorate Kristallnacht, what is widely recognized as the start of the Holocaust and one of the darkest periods in humanity, we are also here to celebrate the best of humanity in recognizing the efforts of Aristides de Sousa Mendes. As I just said, I was going to recite some of the history, but my colleague has managed to do that. In June of 1940, when Sousa Mendes was the Consul General for Portugal in Bordeaux, he essentially, single-handedly, as you just heard, issued tens of thousands of visas in a 9-day period in mid-1940. You will be able to see those events. I also had the opportunity to see this movie, and I think it's very powerful, and I hope it's the beginning of something that will continue to grow, and as the Senator mentioned, hopefully in the not-so-distant future, people will recognize the name Sousa Mendes as they do the name Schindler. Although I suppose I'm here this evening because of my charge as trustee and deputy mayor of the village of Mineola, I am first, for those of you who know me and who don't know me, I'm first and foremost a teacher. I have taught history at Mineola High School since 1993, and it is my love of history and all things Portuguese that first led me to discover this amazing man. I was born in Portugal, and I did a lot of my primary education in the late 1970s and early 1980s in Portugal, my elementary school up until 4th grade. We, of course, learned about Vasco da Gama, and we learned about the Age of Discoveries, and we learned about the Golden Age of Portugal. I even remember reciting every king from the first one in 1143 all the way to the last one in 1910. But we never heard of Sousa Mendes. When I came to the United States, I continued my studies at the Mineola Portuguese School, where again I learned a lot about Portuguese culture, Portuguese history, Portuguese language, yet nothing about Sousa Mendes. And it really wasn't until I went to Adelphi University and I began to study history and then on to Queens College to get my master's in history, where I began to delve deeper into Portuguese history, and I began to learn and hear about Sousa Mendes. And why do I bring this up? I bring this up because although the Portuguese government under Salazar certainly was on the wrong side of history in many ways, the Portuguese people today in Portugal, I just had the opportunity to be there 2 weeks ago in a meeting of Portuguese elected officials from around the world, and I actually had the opportunity to sit with some colleagues of mine from Bordeaux, France, and we shared our impressions of Sousa Mendes. In Bordeaux, they have an elementary school named after him. They have a statue of him. They have a street named after him. So they certainly recognize his importance in that community, and we're just now beginning to give this man his due in this community. And I just want to say that although, again, the Portuguese government may have been on the wrong side of history in relationship to Mr. Sousa Mendes, that the Portuguese people of today, including the thousands of expatriates, some of them here, that call Long Island home, that we stand for and stand with the righteousness that guided this remarkable man to do a remarkable act. We are here to affirm what Sousa Mendes said, and my colleague stole my quote, so I'm going to say it in Portuguese. O meu desejo é o de ficar do lado de Deus contra os homens, em vez de ficar com os homens contra Deus. We are here to say that we not only stand for what Sousa Mendes stood for, but to say that we will not be silent about his message of compassion, of tolerance, of humanity. We will not let his story and his message go silent again, ever. We're deciding not to be bystanders, but rather to be upstanders. Thank you, and enjoy the movie.
There was a momentary dispute at the head table, as you would have seen at the dais, about who was going to introduce me. I decided I'm a man who needs all the introduction he can get, so I'll do it myself. May I just be permitted a correction to the program? I'm listed there as a Holocaust historian. Actually, I'm not an historian. I'm just a simple lawyer. And you'd be amazed, many times when I speak publicly, I get asked questions during the question and answer session, and you'd be amazed what I can get away with by starting my response with the words, well, actually, I'm not an historian. And people kind of sort of nod sympathetically, and you can see them thinking, well, of course, well, what do you expect? And then after that, I can say whatever I like. The Nazi regime in Germany from 1933 to 1945 left in its wake numerous dates which continue to live in infamy. One of those is November the 9th and 10th, which was this past weekend. That was the night and the day of Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. It constituted a major pogrom, a massive pogrom on an enormous scale against Jewish-owned property, both communal as well as personal individual property. It involved massive destruction and devastation on a huge scale, both in Germany as well as Austria, which had been annexed just a short time earlier. There was burning, there was looting, smashing of windows, breaking of furniture inside homes. Jews were killed. The official number is around 91, but in fact it was considerably more than that, because 30,000 Jews were rounded up and sent off to 3 concentration camps. In those concentration camps, they were beaten and tortured mercilessly, so that the actual number who died as a result of Kristallnacht runs to around 2,000 to 2,500. 300 of them, interestingly, were people who committed suicide because of what was going on and what was happening to them. Very, very importantly, this was state-sponsored. It was in fact state-mandated and emanated from a direct order given by Adolf Hitler on the evening of November the 9th. Question is, why was this pogrom conducted? The official pretext was that on November the 7th, 2 days earlier, Herschel Greenspan, a young Jew of Polish extraction who was born in Germany but living in Paris, found out that his parents had been deported from Germany back to Poland. This was part of a Nazi plan to rid Germany of Polish-born Jews. Greenspan was so incensed, he went out, bought a gun and some ammunition, walked into the German embassy in Paris, and the first diplomatic official he met was Ernst von Rath, a young diplomatic officer. He pumped 5 bullets into Ernst von Rath, and 2 days later, von Rath succumbed to his injuries. there was a bitter irony in this because von Rath was not a Nazi. He was against the Nazi racial policies to the extent that he was actually being investigated by the Nazi regime. That's Ernst von Rath. The official pretext, therefore, was that we are going to avenge what Herschel Greenspan has done. The real reason was that this had been brewing for nearly a year. The historians date this back to early 1938 at the very least, and in fact some go back into 1937. The rationale behind it was we want to force the Jews to emigrate, to get out of this country, Germany. We will put pressure on them in this way. They also wanted to expropriate Jewish property. The party needed funds. The government needed foreign currency. And expropriating Jewish assets was seen as a wonderful way of being able to achieve those results. It was part of the 4-year plan which Hermann Göring was conducting. The Nazis, in fact, implemented a fiendishly diabolical 4-step process by which they expropriated Jewish assets in Germany. Step number 1 was forced registration. Step number 2 was Aryanization, forced disposition to Aryans. Step number 3, which is relevant here, was miscellaneous expropriations, fines and taxes. Hermann Göring levied a fine of 1 billion Reichsmarks on the Jewish community. It was a massive sum in German terms. At the same time, the Jews were forced to pay for the cleanup of the mess after Kristallnacht. This was all an excuse to launch into that method of expropriation. Put into context, this was their way of implementing the second limb of Hitler's bifurcated view of the Jews. Jews as evil people who get too much influence in the society. One way of depriving them of that influence was to expropriate their property. Next question, what did it achieve? Well, outside Germany, it caused shock and horror. It brought about condemnation on a widespread scale. They got a bad press, to put it simply. And we can see some of the headlines that appear in this visual presentation. The New York Times headline is particularly significant because the New York Times went out of its way to downplay the Nazi atrocities directed against the Jews. Yet here was the New York Times splashing this story about this massive pogrom onto its front page. Let me read 3 short quotes to give an idea of what this was doing. Martin Gilbert, Sir Martin Gilbert, the famed British historian, writes that no event in the history of German Jews between 1933 and 1945 was so widely reported as it was happening, and the accounts from the foreign journalists working in Germany sent shockwaves around the world. The Times, that's the New York Times, wrote at the time, no foreign propagandist bent upon blackening Germany before the world could outdo the tale of burnings and beatings of blackguardly assaults on defenseless and innocent people which disgraced that country yesterday. Hugh Green writing, look at that headline of on the New York Times, page 1. Hugh Green, writing in the Daily Telegraph, said, mob law ruled in Berlin throughout the afternoon and evening, and hordes of hooligans indulged in an orgy of destruction. I have seen several anti-Jewish outbreaks in Germany. during the last 5 years, but never anything as nauseating as this. Racial hatred and hysteria seem to have taken complete hold of, that's Greenspan, on the day he shot Ernst von Rath. Racial hatred and hysteria seem to have taken complete hold of otherwise decent people. I saw fashionably dressed women clapping their hands and screaming with glee, while respectable middle-class mothers held up their babies to see the fun, quote unquote. The Nazis were very sensitive to this. Even in late 1938, they immediately tried to put a positive spin, claiming that it was all spontaneous and the government had worked hard to stop it. Nothing could have been further from the truth, but they really were stung. Within Germany, what Kristallnacht achieved was it did put pressure on people to emigrate, and a large number tried to get out, and some were actually successful. It instilled a new and greater fear among Jews. It further impoverished the Jewish community, and generally it raised the level of violence to a new and unprecedented level altogether. In the nearly 6 years since the Nazis had come to power, nothing of this level of violence had been perpetrated against the Jews. It therefore, among other things, gave a green light for the future. The rank and file learned the lesson. It's okay to bash up Jews. The regime got away with it. Not everyone liked what they were doing, but there was no serious opposition. It was, as it were, a test run. After that, Hitler became emboldened, and he started threatening total annihilation, including, in particular, his speech in early 1939, in which he threatened, if the Jews cause another world war, it will lead to their total annihilation. The Nazis were always pushing the envelope, testing to see how far they could move, what they could get away with. Many speak of Kristallnacht as the start of the real Holocaust, leading to the extermination of 6 million Jews. What is absolutely clear is that it was a watershed event in the history of the Holocaust. It had a significance of considerable proportions, and that's why we continue to commemorate it 75 years later.
Aristides de Sousa Mendes has been referred to as the Portuguese Schindler. And I think we can all agree that there's a lot to it. Now, I don't want to, and nobody should, belittle Schindler, but I want to put this in perspective a little bit, because I want to suggest to you that Sousa Mendes's performance won one more star than Schindler's. Why? First of all, more people were rescued, many more. Schindler saved, I think, 1,000 people. Many thousands were saved by Sousa Mendes. Secondly, Schindler knew the people that he was saving. These are the people who were working for him. I'm not saying there was any intimate connection there, but he knew them. It was easier. It was easier to take responsibility for them. Sousa Mendes didn't know anybody. People walked by, as you could see, there was an assembly line. He didn't get a chance to know anybody, except for Rabbi Kruger, of course. So he dug deeper into the well of humanity to find the resources to do what he did. Thirdly, unlike Schindler, Sousa Mendes defied the big boss. He defied him in a way that Schindler didn't. There was no, as far as I know, there was no threat to Schindler, and Schindler always had an excuse. He needed the workers to produce whatever it was that the Nazis needed. Whereas, again, Sousa Mendes defied Salazar. And fourthly, Schindler emerged mostly unscathed from the war, and Sousa Mendes, of course, lost everything: family, wealth, home. His children disappeared. They couldn't survive in the administration of Salazar. Now, why didn't he get the recognition that we're trying to give him today? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. He was in the corner of Europe, right? Schindler was in the belly of the beast, and Sousa Mendes was in the corner. But that doesn't take away from the distinctions that we drew a couple of minutes ago about the careers of Schindler and Sousa Mendes. As for the movie, I think I was amazed. I was uplifted and I was roused to action. Doubly so because I am the descendant of a Sousa Mendes visa recipient. Two, mother and father, I'm reminded, thank you. I actually have the visa here with me for any of you who want to look at it. It's a document that I prize. And I only learned about this about a year ago, and you'll learn more about how I learned about this in a talk in a couple of minutes by Olivia Mattis. Sousa Mendes is a guy that can unite hardcore liberals and benighted conservatives. Everybody cheers for Sousa Mendes. It's hard for anybody to cheer for anybody in this day and age, but I think we all cheer for him, I think. So if Sousa Mendes is a model for us, what does it really mean? If we all cheer for him, then it means that we like what he did. And if we're going to model our behavior on him, what does it mean? What kind of power do we have? Well, let me just tell you very briefly about a moment during my college years. A book came out called Presidential Power by a man by the name of Richard Neustadt, which won lots of awards. And Richard Neustadt came forward with this incredible theory, which is that presidents don't have power. They rely on the bureaucrats under them. And any clever bureaucrat can undermine the program of the boss, the President of the United States. That came as an incredible revelation to the political science people, and I remember spending hours discussing this. And I was a youngster then. What did I know about, presidential orders and the extent to which they were honored? Well, it turns out, and I learned, through years of experience, it turns out that they have a lot of power, and that's why the book by Richard Neustadt got such a stunning reception. Now, okay, so we have power. What does it mean? And I'm just going to raise a couple of questions with you. One of the great issues here in the United States is Mexicans. Mexicans who are here illegally. What do we do about them? What do we do about Eric Snowden? Now, maybe you will say that, all right, in those cases, it's not life or death, right? Sousa Mendes understood that it was a matter of life and death. Maybe we don't have to get worked up over that. But that begs the question of what do we do about refugees from Rwanda? What did we do? Very little. Kosovo, and now Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. What does Sousa Mendes have to teach us about the refugees who are pouring out by the hundreds of thousands from those countries? I'd like now, I'm not going to answer the question. Maybe if you ask me, maybe I'll get a chance. I'll say something later. But I'm trying to keep the program short. Our next speaker is, I think it's Olivia Mattis. Where are you, Olivia?
I'm right here, but before I speak, I think we should
Yes, all right, I'm going to ask, you want to come first? You come first. Jean-Claude? Okay, I was going to put him after the others. Fine, come forward. No, you have to speak into the microphone because this is being taped. Jean-Claude is a playwright, a professor, and what else, Jean-Claude?
I was there.
You were there, okay, most important, you were there.
My last name is Vanitali. It was very moving to watch that movie because I was 3 years old on May 10th, 1940, when the Nazis bombed Brussels. I was a little Belgian Jewish boy. I woke up at 4 in the morning, and I was terribly scared by all the noises. I went into the living room. I asked my mother, what's going on? She said, they're fixing the trucks in the garage next door. So we fled. My father was in the Belgian army. My mother drove herself, her parents, my father's parents, and me and her sister into France. We were driven, my mother drove us along those roads that we saw in the movie, those crowded roads. I tried to crawl into her lap. Of course, I wasn't allowed to do that. My father swam out to the British ships at Dunkirk and eventually joined us again in France. And we went to Bordeaux. We went to Bordeaux because my paternal grandparents wanted to take a ship to go to London, to go to England. And they did get on a ship. It was a ship for Dutch nationals. And I remember standing at the dock in Bordeaux. I was 4 by then. I was standing on the dock. I had each of a parent's hands in my hand, looking up at this huge, huge ship. I couldn't imagine why such a huge building could float. And my grandparents waving, and eventually they became dots in the ocean. And the ship was hit by a mine, or the ship hit a mine, and my grandparents drowned and were killed. My father did everything he could to get the rest of us to get visas, to get out. We had to get Spanish visas. We had to get Portuguese visas. I didn't know really about Sousa Mendes until Olivia Mattis and the Sousa Mendes Foundation talked about him. There's a line in Tennessee Williams about the kindness of strangers and having to rely on it. It's unbelievable what happened. I'm also full of admiration for my father, who managed somehow to get us these visas, including the one from Sousa Mendes. It's a miracle that I'm here. It's a miracle that my family, aside from my paternal grandparents, were saved. My gratitude to Sousa Mendes is obviously immense. I think that a gesture like that, a gesture such an existential, deep gesture from the heart, is a teaching. It's a teaching about how to be. I don't think that we'll have another Holocaust in the same pattern as the one that we've had before. Evil doesn't recur in the same shape necessarily. It doesn't mean that there isn't evil around today. I'm moved to remember Eisenhower warning us about the industrial military complex and how it can take things over. There are current heroes, Edward Snowden for one, who was mentioned, and other whistleblowers, Manning in the Army, people who are standing up. There's a woman who was a whistleblower from the FBI. People who are standing up. There is right now in Poland, at this moment, a global warming conference which is going on, all the countries of the world trying to figure out what to do about global warming. And the head of the Philippine delegation has just started a hunger strike because his family has been annihilated or devastated by the typhoon in the Philippines that just hit the Philippines. Why are there typhoons of that magnitude? The line points directly to corporate greed, causing pollution, causing global warming. Even to stand up and say that is an act of courage. There are constantly ways in which we can stand up and say the truth, in which we can stand up and question authority, and we must, because the survival of humanity depends on our doing just the kind of thing that Sousa Mendes did. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I can certainly answer any questions. I guess I should tell you a little bit about the foundation, what we do, and I can answer questions about the film or really whatever you like. So 3 years ago, a few of us started the Sousa Mendes Foundation. It's a partnership between families who received visas from Aristides de Sousa Mendes, including my own family. My father was 7 years old when he got the visa, and members of the Sousa Mendes family, and then some other supporters in both the Portuguese and Jewish communities are part of our board as well. So it's a foundation with a twofold mission. One is devoted to the house that you saw at the end of the film, the Sousa Mendes house. Well, it's still standing in Portugal, but it's in a state of ruin. And so our dream is to convert that into a museum and memorial and site of conscience. And when it's completed, it will be the first Holocaust memorial in the country of Portugal. So that is part one of our mission, our dream, is to raise money for that project. And the second part of our mission is to spread the story of Sousa Mendes in this country, and we do it through film showings like we had tonight. We have an exhibition. We work with journalists on news stories. There was a big story this summer in the New York Times and front page of the Herald Tribune, and we were in the Independent of London and all kinds of places. So we're trying to spread the story as much as we can. We're also developing educational materials for young people. We have a comic book that was done in Portuguese by José Rui, who's a famous Portuguese cartoonist. And so we have created English and French language editions of this comic book that we want to get into every Portuguese school, every bar mitzvah training program, every middle school in the United States and in Canada, since it's both in English and in French. So we're very ambitious. We have no staff. It's all volunteer board members doing this on top of our full-time jobs. And we have no office. We are spread from coast to coast. We have our meetings by conference call. One of our big projects, one of our biggest projects, is to actually find the 30,000. To find these visa recipients. So we found the Subotnik family, we found the Vanitali family, and many, many other families. So we have at this point identified 3,000, approximately 3,000 individual Sousa Mendes visa recipients by name. So it's quite a feat, and we just found out last week that we got a grant in the amount of $25,000 from the Claims Conference, which is an organization that gives funds to Holocaust-related projects, and that's in support of our research program and touring our exhibitions. So it's a matching grant, so now we have to raise another $25,000 to get that $25,000. So if this sounds like an appeal for money, I guess it is. Anyway, thank you, Dan, so much for hosting this, and Dean Rosenblum. It's fantastic. We love bringing this story to communities of all kinds, and particularly a community such as this one that's concerned with the legal implications. I mean, that's a whole other side of the story that could be, you could write a whole book on just that side of the story. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Olivia.
Good evening. Like Professor Subotnick said, my name is Maggie Rodriguez, and I am a very proud alumni of Touro Law School. My legal education here had opened a lot of doors for me, which I'm very, very proud of. Thank you to all, and I'm so happy to be able to see many of my professors here. And you look as young as you did 12 years ago. My office, the Nassau County Commission on Human Rights, what do? We investigate human rights complaints. Believe it or not, discrimination is rampant. Not only in Nassau County, I would say all over the world. This is why my office gets complaints at least 10 to 12 a day. We investigate human rights complaints because of a person's race, color, age, sex, disability, religion, sexual orientation, and marital status. And it is extremely sad to see one of the fastest growing discrimination cases that we are receiving right now in Nassau County is because of age. It's not because of race and color. It's age and religion. September 11 did a lot to bring that about. And as I was watching the movie tonight, a lot of things came to mind. Because I'm seeing racial cleansing and ethnic cleansing in a lot of countries, and I have been to a lot of countries. Right now, one of the most silent yet soon to become very loud problem, it is what's going on right now in the Dominican Republic when it comes to the Haitian population. Being of Haitian descent myself, I see a racial cleansing, I see a color cleansing, and I see ethnic cleansing. It's going to become a problem very much for the United States because a lot of these people are going to be coming here. They're not going to go back to Haiti. Haiti is as poor as it can ever be. So they're not going back to Haiti. They're going to come back here. So it's going to be a problem for us. So soon we may see probably another Sousa, probably trying to bring in a lot of those, I call them Haitians, and they're not. They are Dominicans, because they were born there and all that. So, like Professor Subotnick said, there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of Sousas out there. And I hope that when we all live here, we take in mind, I cannot remember his exact words, but I guess in some, what he meant to say is this: any law, anything that goes against God is not a law or any morale that one should really follow, and which is exactly what he did. He didn't follow the law, he followed his conscience. At Nassau County Commission on Human Rights, that's what we do. We try to eradicate discrimination. It's tough, it's hard, but every day when we try to stop a discrimination, it is one person that is being assisted. So Nassau County is open for business. Nassau County is here to serve you. So if you know of anybody who's been discriminated against in Nassau County, please call my office. I brought in business cards, which I'll be more than happy to leave with Touro Law School, and please call my office, and my office is there to assist you. Thank you.
Dennis had 15 children, right?
Angelina and the one with Andre. Two of his children are still living, two daughters, and of course his grandchildren. So several of his grandchildren serve on our board of directors. The children and grandchildren are their own diaspora. They scattered to the four winds. Basically what happened was that over the course of Sousa Mendes' career, he was posted in various countries, and the children were born in these different countries. Some were born in Tanzania, at the time it was called Zanzibar, in Africa. Some were born in Brazil, some were born in the United States when he was consul for 2 years in San Francisco. So they were born in different places. Some were born in Belgium, one was born in Spain. And so when the disaster hit the family, they could have no future in Portugal. The children could no longer go to school. The older children could not go to university or find employment. They were blacklisted. There was no future for them in Portugal, and they all had to leave. So we have been in communication with the Holocaust Museum in Washington. They happen to have a file. Well, they have a collection of materials from the Quakers, who were helping refugees in those days. And in there, there's a file on the Sousa Mendes family. They were asking for visas to the United States, hoping the Quakers would help them get these visas. The United States would not let them in. Yeah, because they didn't consider the Sousa Mendes family to be bona fide refugees. People didn't understand the story. What else is there to say? So the children scattered, and so one branch went to Canada, and that branch became French-Canadian. Several are in the United States, some are in Belgium. They're all over the place, and they speak different languages. They don't speak the same language anymore, but they're united in their firm belief that their father-grandfather did the right thing and that he should have done it all over again. So.
Aren't there one or two who are still in Portugal or came back to Portugal, or am I wrong?
So one of the daughters of Sousa Mendes, Clotilde, was married at that point to a Portuguese man. So she stayed in Portugal and had 11 children. So that branch is in Portugal. Right. Although they also, those children, Clotilde's children left to go here and there and only came back to Portugal after the Salazar period was done. Yeah. Yes?
Of the 30,000 refugees, where did most of them migrate? What countries?
So we are researching this at the micro level, family by family, so I can't really give you statistics yet. I can really only give you the information that we have through internet sources, because until we got this grant, we were all in front of our computers. Now this grant is going to allow us to visit the national archives of various countries like Brazil and so forth, Argentina, and see, who went there. Because what we're doing is we're cross-referencing Sousa Mendes' list with ship passenger lists. And for example, where's Mr. Vanitali? Where did he go? There you are. So in your case, it said Vanitali, and then the next line was Levy. That's all it says in the visa book. But in fact, it was a whole family of how many of you under those two names? 8 of you or whatever it was. Yeah. So the passenger lists are beautiful because they list the whole family down to the newborn babies, whereas the visa registry book lists only the passport holders who were the parents. The children were between the lines because they'd be listed on their parents' passport. So where did they end up? United States, Brazil, Australia, England, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Dominican Republic, people went through different places. Yeah.
Let me just add, Olivia and I were at a conference last week, another Sousa Mendes conference in the city, and we were blown away by hearing that Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, attempted early on to get a visa to come to the United States. He had some relatives here, but the relatives were poor, and in order to get admission to the United States, to gain admission to the United States, they had to have certificates of wealth, a balance sheet and an income statement to justify the risk that the United States government was taking in allowing them to come in. And he did finally get it, but by that time it was too late. There was no getting out of Holland at that time, and then certainly not Germany. and the family perished. But the idea that Anne Frank could still be with us, she was born in 1929, she could still be with us, is just horrifying a thought. Another question? Yes.
Can you generalize about the non-Jewish people who got visas? Were they political dissidents, or why did they need to flee?
All right. Olivia, come here. The question is, can you talk about the non-Jewish refugees and tell us a little bit about what happened to them?
I can tell you a little less about that than about the Jewish families. I'm not sure why. We've been a little less successful in finding them, I guess.
Why did they need to flee in the first place?
Well, you know, Belgium, for example, had been occupied in World War I, and we've met a number of Belgian families who are on our list who said, you know, my father remembered what it was like for us to live under the Germans the first time, and we weren't about to do it again. So it was, you know, that kind of thing where they weren't under threat of death, but they weren't interested in living under occupation either. Yeah, political refugees of all kinds. Salvador Dali, the painter, was a Sousa Mendes visa recipient. He's a problematic figure politically, but his wife was Russian, and Russians were not allowed to get Portuguese visas, so Sousa Mendes had to defy his government to give them a visa. So you know, many artists were on the Nazis' degenerate art list, and there was this recent art find in Munich of 1,500 works of art or something like this, and so Salvador Dali is listed there in the inventory, so he was clearly a quote-unquote degenerate artist and would have, you know, feared a lot from that. So other famous visa recipients, as long as we're on fame, Hans and Margaret Ray, the authors of Curious George, were Sousa Mendes visa recipients, and they escaped with the manuscript of the first Curious George book in their suitcase, which they were able to publish in New York in 1941. So there would have been no Curious George without Sousa Mendes. So that's pretty fantastic.
Yes.
Why hasn't the Portuguese government recognized or put forward more support for him, especially even for tourism purposes and other now?
Oh, that's a good one. First of all, the Portuguese government has done a lot. Maybe not as much as we would want, but a lot. In the 1980s, was it 87? I think 87. Sousa Mendes was publicly rehabilitated onto the honor roll of diplomats. There was some kind of financial compensation provided to his family. In Portugal, there are schools named after him. There are streets. He is becoming better known just about by the day. The problem is, and correct me if I got it wrong, because you know more than I do, Olivia, the problem is that the authorities are a little reluctant to embrace him. A little reluctant, not a lot, just a little reluctant. And why is that? Because he was disobedient. It's not a message that a government wants to promote. On the other hand, he was a hero, a universal hero, and Portugal, like many other countries, needs heroes. And on top of it, to be a little cynical, there's tourism. So, the Portuguese government knows that that he's a hero now internationally, going to become a greater one, so they're willing to invest in him. Besides that, they're investing a lot in Jewish relics from the pre-Inquisition period, and actually the post-Inquisition period. So you can go and see a synagogue in a town called Tovar that hasn't been used for sorry? Tovar. You're from Tovar. Oh, you know the synagogue. Okay, it hasn't been used in hundreds and hundreds of years. And Olivia and I were on a pilgrimage, and we stopped there. And it was, and Rose, yeah, and it was amazing. what they had done. It's not a, it's not a huge enterprise, but it's nice to see the government recognizing kind of the Jewish history. Speaking of which, I want to tell you that I was blown away when I learned that 40% of the population, right after the Inquisition started, after the Inquisition started in Spain, and all the Jews, many of the Jews left for Portugal, the closest refuge. At some point in time, 40% of the population of Portugal was Jewish, which is why a lot of Portuguese people there and here understand that it is very likely that they carry some Jewish blood.
Probably in this room.
Probably. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just would like to point out, I went to Touro a couple of times, but maybe the last time 2-3 years ago, and the place was supported by really just an old couple and contributions, and the government, the ceiling was leaking, and the government was doing nothing. Now,
We were there last summer, and it was a joy.
That's a good sign that
Yeah.
the government's doing something fundamentally. And it was promoted as a tourist in the town, but the government wasn't doing anything. It was a sad situation. But I'm glad to hear that.
Anybody else? Yes.
I would like to know more about the fact that you remember things that happened to you as a 3-year-old. Do people ever talk to you about that? I mean, I believe it, but I wonder if that's a common phenomenon, that when something really extraordinary like that happens, you do remember.
Jean-Claude, would you stand up here by the mic?
It was more traumatic than it's taken me many, many years to realize how traumatic it was. This is an indirect response to your question. I don't know how frequently people remember things like that, but I guess you could have a shock and remember nothing. In my case, no. I have a very good memory anyway, and it's as if I have snapshots in my head. I can remember that day, the first day that we were leaving Belgium. I remember being in the basement of a restaurant with my mother taking I just had a coat on over my pajamas, so now they were taking my coat off and dressing me. And I remember protesting that very, very much. I remember screaming that. So I have several memories. And then I have memories of being in Estoril in Portugal. I remember what the pensione was like. I remember planting apricot pits I remember all kinds of things, and some a little more traumatic than that. But I never saw a Nazi during that time. Even though I never saw a Nazi, in some way I've been fearful all my life. There's a way in which it's just because it just got stamped into me through the fear that my parents were experiencing. So I think that's why. I think it was just such huge events, such a massive change in the routine that I couldn't be protected out of it by loving parents.
It's very impressive.
Thank you.
Yes.
It seems to me that, I thought I can talk loudly, but.
You can.
Okay. It seems to me that one of the main underlying commentaries that the film had is the individual making a decision, in this case with God. Individuals can make a decision of right and wrong without God. And how does the individual come to that? Is it in his DNA? Is it in the culture? Where does it come from? And those opportunities are existing everywhere for a person that's working to contest racism, sexism, etc. It occurs here, and we're watching it occur all the time in Africa between the tribes. And I keep wondering, will they ever get past that? Can we humans get past it? Is it their DNA is so corrupt that nobody can see what they're doing to each other? And so that, to me, is even a more important theme than just the embodiment of the 30,000 saved. It has to do with the historical DNA of the human animal since the tribes or the caveman, how far back you care to go.
I'm going to use my prerogative and not allow anybody to answer that question, because if anybody attempts to do so, we're going to be here till 5 in the morning. And then you'll drive home and get into accidents, and you'll sue the law school. So we can't allow that to happen. One final thought, and then is there a representative of the Portuguese community here?
I just have a question.
Yeah, no, wait, oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
How could the Portuguese community support this foundation? What are the ways we could contribute to this foundation?
Well, go on our website, susamendesfoundation.org. There were brochures. I don't know if you got one. And I can also give you my card, so.
Yeah.
Something specific we can help with. I mean, the global thing is we're trying to raise money for a whole variety of causes, and that's the easiest way to support, but there might be other ways.
Is it possible for us to show the movie in a Portuguese class?
For sure.
setting?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
maybe solicit some donations?
Email me or give me
Do
your
we have the
contact.
authorization to do so, or do we?
We represent the film
Okay.
in North America, so you would talk to us.
Okay, yeah.
Very quickly, has the family given up the right to the home for this foundation, or has?
Olivia, come here.
Yeah.
Has the family given up the right to the home?
No, not at all. I mean, you spoke earlier about financial compensation that was made by the government of Portugal to the family. It's not exactly the case. What they did was they gave financial compensation that then went into making a foundation in Portugal. So the family never got anything directly from this compensation. So there's a foundation in Portugal that owns the home. And so our intent is to work with that Portuguese foundation support them. The house is in Portugal, and it belongs to that foundation. So, but it's...
Wasn't there some talk, I might be wrong about this, about getting an interest in Sousa Mendes among Portuguese students in college? And the way you have the different groups like the Union Society and that Sousa Mendes might make a nice rallying point for people who wanted the Portuguese culture.
The question is, sorry, yeah, the question is there any effort to stimulate Sousa Mendes groups, organizations on campus to promote his message? And Olivia, do you know anything about it? No. Okay, there's supposed to be somebody who's gonna present a book. Who's got the book? You have it. Come. While I'm going to tell you who this gentleman is in a minute, but I do want to say something to the Portuguese community that will be of interest to you. That in all the work we have done for the foundation, we have never heard a story of discrimination against the Jewish refugees in Portugal. You interview them, and they are singularly grateful for everything that they got, the cooperation, the food, the rent. They got everything. They had help, of course, not of course, but they had help from Jewish philanthropical organizations. But there was not one incident that was reported to us. I'm sure there was something. I mean, we're talking about a lot of people, where the Jews felt they were not welcome in Portugal. Okay, Gabriel. Gabriel is a student here at Touro, and you work for Senator Martins?
No, Control Maragos, Nassau County.
Okay, for who? I'm sorry?
George Maragos, Control.
Okay, and he has a statement to make to us. He also was enormously important in organizing this conference.
Boa noite, boa noite. First and foremost, I want to thank all the Portuguese organizations that came out tonight. I think we have about 12 here. I see the Lions Club, I know the Farmingville Portuguese Club, I know the school in Farmingville, both Ranchos, Aldeias de Portugal, and Juventude and Sonhos de Portugal, the Mini Old Portuguese Center, and the Long Island Portuguese Lions Club, which is here in Mass. And first, as Professor Subotnick said, I'm here representing Nassau County as well. And one of the things that we wanted to get done, which unfortunately time didn't allow, was to come up with some commemoration at the school in Sousa Mendes' name, so that I'm also a 4-year part-time student here. I graduate in May, and I wanted to make sure that I left something behind that other generations could see on the wall, that Sousa Mendes' memory is alive and well, and that we're all doing our part to make sure the future generations remember it. So on behalf of Control Maragos in Nassau County, I wanted to call up Olivia and Dean Sullivan. I wanted to present a citation commemorating tonight's event, so that the date and the event itself will always be commemorated from here on going forward. So.
Thank you so much.
And if we can get a photo. Stay right here. And of course, because I never stopped thinking, we also came up with a few other ideas. Now, there is a custom in Portugal that you never go into someone's home without bringing a gift. And I wanted to make sure that we continue that. So if we can, I would like to call a representative from each of the Portuguese clubs up here with me today. We're going to give a gift to the Touro Law Center. I want to make sure everybody's represented. So all the groups, I know Tony's over there. I see Vilio, Senhora Carlos, and my father representing the Portuguese Heritage Society, Miniola. If you all can come up just for a moment, we can do his presentation. So, like the professor said, this is going to be a reciprocal gift. Oh, and Academia de Bacalhau. Excuse me. I have 3 things up here. 1, Gal Barcelos, one of the trinkets of good luck and warding against the evil eye. It is something that every Portuguese club, every Portuguese home, every Portuguese business has. And we'd like to present that to you, Dean Sullivan. I'll let, who wants to volunteer to present it? Of the school. Thank you very much, Dean Sullivan. And 2 other things. One is a copy of Sousa Mendes' book. Unfortunately, it's in Portuguese, but we would like to present this to the school to put it into the Gould Law Library, so that it will always be there. Even if they can't read it, they'll see the name on the title and they'll be remembered of what happened. I also had everybody who's here tonight sign it, so that later on in life when we pass this book again, we'll remember what we did here today. If you haven't signed it, make sure you sign it before you leave. We would like to present this one. Got me in. Dean Sullivan.
It is an honor. Thank you very much.
And because it goes both ways, and as a Touro student, I also want to thank the Portuguese community for what they have done tonight by showing up. I mean, I know it's a Tuesday, we're in Central Islip, a lot of you traveled 1 to 2 hours in traffic, and I want to make sure that it goes both ways, and there's something in our community that commemorates this event. And Dean, I'd like you to present this poster of tonight's event that was hanging up in the hallway all throughout the week, that has been signed by all the people here today, and presented to the Portuguese Cultural and Language School in Farmingville, so that they can put up in one of their classrooms, and those students will remember today as well. Oh.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, Professor Subotnick and Dean Rosenblum, everybody for coming tonight, for participating in our panel, for sticking with it until the end. That's a sign of a really successful program and the opening of another dialogue here at the Law Center. Drive safely, and we hope to see you again soon.